My name is David Brereton. I'm from the University of Queensland Sustainable Minerals Institute. So I am the chair for this session. We have three very knowledgeable and interesting presenters who I will introduce when they come up to talk. We have a strong Latin American focus. Two of our speakers are from Peru, and our third is from Bolivia. I think that's not by accident, really, that there is a lot of interesting experiences to share out of Latin America around the whole issue of subnational governance. Just before introducing Carlos Monga as our first presenter, I just wanted to make a couple of framing comments. First of those is to assure you that all of our presenters are committed to only taking 10 to 12 minutes each to leave plenty of time for questions, not just for questions but discussion. We're going to be very interested to hear about the experience of other countries in terms of how they're addressing the challenges and possibilities that arise at the subnational level. For the purpose of this workshop, subnational governance really encompasses everything from units of government, from states to provinces down to municipalities. So the subnational government is a series of layers. It's not a single entity, but it's everything below the level of national government. I think globally now there's increasing recognition that what happens at this level is absolutely critical to determining whether or not you can get good development outcomes from mining. So we know that weak or dysfunctional subnational governance is likely to mean regulatory failure, and that's very significant because there are a growing number of countries which are pushing responsibility for regulatory enforcement down to the subnational level. Increased conflict. If local governance, particularly at the municipality level, is dysfunctional, you're likely to have communities, more likely to have communities that are divided, the more difficult it is to have constructive engagement with developers or other levels of government. Where subnational governance is dysfunctional, significantly heightened risks around corruption and the misuse of funds. And I think arguably, perhaps most importantly, is the failure to take advantage of the development opportunities that resource projects can bring. So there's a whole range of reasons for why this is such a critically important area. And addressing those challenges is a combination of thinking in smart ways around institutional and regulatory design, but it's also around thinking of ways to strengthen capacity at that level, and also around thinking of ways to empower citizens to demand and expect more of their governments. And these are huge challenges in a country context or a global context, because when you're dealing with subnational governance, you're potentially dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of discrete units as opposed to just working with national government, but a critical level to engage with. So I look forward to hearing from our presenters, each of whom has a very interesting perspective on these issues, and as I say, some very strong learnings and experiences out of Latin America. And then as we move to our plenary discussion, to open it up to hear about experiences from other jurisdictions. So our first presenter is Carlos Monga. Carlos is currently the Latin American Regional Coordinator for Revenue Watch Institute. He's also a research associate at the Center for the Promotion of Development. I'm actually doing the Spanish translation, Carlos, so I don't make a mess of it. He's also, I know he's a Center for Promotion of Development in Lima, Peru, and he is also a faculty member at Católica University in Peru as well. So he has broad experience in this area, is able to offer a perspective that extends beyond Peru, but is obviously enriched by his Peruvian knowledge. So over to you, Carlos.
Hi, thank you for the invitation and congratulations for this very important effort. I have prepared just 2 slides. The first wants to illustrate the complexity of the subnational agenda when you talk about the extractive industries. In a country like Peru, but this is also happening elsewhere in Latin America, When you have concurrent processes of political and administrative decentralization at the same time that you're experiencing a boom in investments in the extractive sector in response to increasing demand and prices, basically for minerals, but also for oil and gas, we face a very complicated subnational agenda. First, subnational governments have a participation in the way environmental impact assessments, in the way cost-benefit analyses are made. They have a mandate to do economic and ecological zoning and to produce what we call ordenamiento territorial, could be translated as territorial management. And they also have an increasing say in the monitoring of the environmental impacts of the extractive industries. Second, regional and local governments are also involved in the processes that allow for citizens' participation in diverse aspects of the extractive sector. We now have a free, prior, and informed consensus consultation law. We have the audiences for the environmental impact assessments, and we have participatory mechanisms when it comes to planning and budgeting. And in the producing regions, most of those budgets are composed of extractive rent. We also have subnational governments very much interested in the national definitions around the fiscal regimes and the way contracts are negotiated with the companies, be it private or public foreign companies, because those fiscal regimes and those contracts are the ones that are going to finally determine how much rent is available for those subnational governments. Also, they have the responsibility to manage a good chunk of the extractive rent. So we have a very critical issue of how is this money spent and what are the capacities that these subnational authorities have to spend the money in a wise manner, in a way that brings about social benefits, that brings about economic growth and diversification and development and well-being in ultimate instance. Carlos Casas is going to go much more in detail into this very critical issue. We have also the challenge of transparency and accountability at a subnational level. We have a freedom of information law that has specific mandates to what subnational governments have to disclose through the web pages and other mechanisms. But we also have the EITI in Peru, and currently it's being proposed that 3 subnational experiences should be developed in the context of the Peruvian EITI. And we also have the Open Government Partnership, which at this point is only involving the central government, but it should also go subnational and establish targets for the subnational governments to make or to achieve in terms of progressing in transparency and accountability, in this case around the extractive sector. We have a huge discussion about the economic and social, the direct economic and social impacts of the extractive investments at a subnational level. The whole issue of local content has to do with the way local economic agents are able to provide goods and services. We have direct environmental impacts, and we have, of course, indirect economic and social impacts through the handling of the extractive rent in the hands of subnational governments. And finally, we have a very conflictive situation in Peru. The vast majority of social conflicts are around extractive industries, and the subnational governments are also facing this situation, are dragged into conflicts or choose to participate in the conflicts in one way or the other, but they are confronted with conflicts in their territories. So this was just an idea to present how complex the agenda is when you are talking about subnational governments and processes of decentralization in the context of an extractive industries boom. Now, all of this presents, I would say, one political challenge and also a conceptual challenge. Politically speaking, it is very important to understand that the lack of good governance at the local level can, and in fact is creating a political national crisis. In Peru, at least, during this present administration, 2 prime ministers have had to resign because they were not able to deal with the conflict around the Conga mining project, which is the largest mining project in Peru today. So the lack of governance at the local level can have and is having a national political impact, bringing about a crisis of what in Spanish we would say gobernabilidad, which is different from gobernanza or governance, no? But it also, in more scholarly terms, in the conceptual level, it's bringing about a conceptual debate. We have been talking for years about transparency and accountability in the extractive sector, and now I think we are all clear that we need to discuss about governance of the extractive sector. But when you place the extractive sector, you localize the extractive sector in a given territory, where you have people that have consultation and participation rights, when you have subnational authorities which are elected and have a mandate and are in charge of a number of responsibilities regarding the environment, social well-being, economic development, then we need to frame the discussion of the extractive industries governance within a broader frame, which is that of the governance of the territories, which includes a discussion about territorial governance, territorial citizenship, and territorial democracy in ultimate terms. So we are facing a very complex agenda in the subnational level when you bring together processes of decentralization with a boom in the extractive sector, and in terms, this is fueling national political debates, and when it's not handled properly, you can end up with national political crisis, and in a more conceptual level, I think it's demanding from us that we move from the transparency and accountability agenda fully into the governance agenda for the extractive sector. But once we place it in the territories, then we need to engage in an even broader debate that is talking about territorial governance, territorial citizenship, and territorial democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. That was remarkably succinct and an excellent framing for the session. Our next presenter and then subsequently discussant is Professor Carlos Casas from the Universidad del Pacifico in Lima in Peru. He's the chair of the economics department. His research specialization includes fiscal and political decentralization, taxation regimes for the mining sector and the use of subnational revenues for mining. He is also a former Vice Minister of Economy of Peru and has worked as a consultant for the World Bank on various projects. Particular interest today, and will be a focus of his presentation, is the work he's been doing in a project, I believe funded by the bank, that is providing technical assistance to local governments in the use of resources oriented to public investment, which is funded directly by companies. So, Carlos, please.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here, and my presentation will focus on the specific experience of Peru in the development of infrastructure projects. The mineral prices boom observed during the last years has enhanced the importance of extractive industries in various countries, especially of mining. For example, in Peru, in 1998, mining participation in GDP was 4%, and by 2011, it reached 11%. And all extractive activities together went from representing 6% of GDP, and by 2011, it reached 11%. And all extractive activities together went from representing, 6% and then 16%. This clearly indicates a greater presence of extractive industries in the Peruvian economy, which has had impact in various aspects. Allow me to illustrate with some figures. During the 1998 to 2012 period, Peruvian exports in value grew 700%, and mining export grew nearly 850%. This implicates an average annual growth rate of 17%, higher than the 6% registered by GDP during the same period. Today, mining export represents nearly 60% of total Peruvian exports, and although the main mining export products are gold and copper, we have a diversified supply, including silver, lead, zinc, among others. 12 years ago, mining contribution to tax revenues was 5%. Nowadays, mining represents almost 25% of tax revenues. Additionally, it is one of the economic sectors with higher tax pressure, calculated in almost 55%. As for investment, it is expected that during the next 4 years, investment in new mining projects will reach $50 billion, which is almost 30% of Peruvian GDP last year. As we can appreciate, mining presence has grown considerably during the last years. Everything I have just told you has had a quite significant impact in public finances at subnational level as well. This has its origin in the law which states that 50% of income tax paid by mining companies goes directly to subnational governments, as named canon. These are divided as following: 75% for municipalities, 20% for regional governments, and 5% to public universities. Since mineral resources are not evenly distributed among the Peruvian territory, impact in public finances among different regions has also been quite uneven. Canon transfer have generated huge disparities among municipalities and regional governments, leading to a considerable inequality in geographic terms. Canon transfers have increased significantly during the last years. During the period 2004-2011, they have multiplied by more than 11. These resources can only be oriented to capital expenditures. As a result, we can find some municipalities with enormous amounts of money that they are not able to spend because they lack capabilities. In fact, some studies show that municipalities which self-report greater need of capacity building are less capable to transfer their income in expenditure that will have effective impact in their communities. The incapability to spend is evidenced by bank deposits corresponding to non-spent canon, which reach quite considerable amounts. Hence, some areas in Peru are living the paradox of being very poor but having significant amounts of money which they cannot spend, generating social discontent. This partially explains the rising social conflict around mining areas, which increases the uncertainty about mining viability in Peru. There is an existing debate in Peru about the natural resource course, if it will arrive or not. In our country, we are still in the first stages where extractive industry grows strong and steady. So it is too early to talk about a natural resource blessing or a course. We need to work in building strong institutions, develop human capital, and invest in research and development to assure Peru will follow a sustainable growth path and to avoid a middle income trap as well. The challenge is big, and there is a lot of debate in Peru. One of the most claimed reforms is the state reform. It is necessary to have an efficient state playing an active role as a partner in the goal of economic growth. And among the main tasks is reducing transaction costs and offering better public goods and services to citizens in an efficient and effective way, as well as improving human capital capabilities. These tasks cannot be procrastinated. Hence, it is important to develop capabilities in the Peruvian public sector at all levels, national and subnational. We have already mentioned the existing problem in subnational governments to execute investment adequately and on time. It is important to develop skills for formulating investment projects that will fulfill technical standards established in the public investment national system. The main problems municipalities receiving canon face is not having the adequate personnel, which leads to hiring external consultants who do not deliver high-quality work and who do not transfer knowledge to municipality workers so they can formulate quality investment projects in the future. One of the strategies used during the last years is developing short workshops for capacity development. However, in our opinion, they may not be the best way to solve the problem. These short workshops are taught by professors coming from the capital city to teach intensive courses during the weekends, which implies having over 20 hours of lectures and developing practical cases in less than 3 days. Having such an intense lecture burden in so little time is not effective, as professors end up exhausted and pupils' retaining capacity is very low. However, the certificate given for assisting to the workshop is useful for promotions in public administration careers. So there is a high demand for these short workshops, but the final result of better infrastructure projects does not happen. Millions of dollars has been spent in this method by the state, international corporation, and mining enterprises. Fortunately, alternative methodologies to provide technical assistance to public servants working in municipalities have developed. This implies working permanently with municipalities solving practical problems they face on their everyday work. Experts make periodic visits to municipalities to work with a group of public servants chosen by the mayor in developing investment projects. These projects are prioritized according to the zone's need, considering basic needs gaps and also bearing in mind citizens' demand. What people ask for is not necessarily what they really need. I do not know how it is in other countries, but in Peru, usually people ask for commemorative monuments, stadiums, or bullfights arenas. They think that having this type of infrastructure will turn the district important. These demands may occur even when they have significant education and health gaps. Hence, it is important to work closely with local authorities so they can realize their investment decisions should be oriented to close basic needs gaps. In our university, we are working with local governments from Ayacucho in the southern highlands, sponsored by an enterprise related to an extractive industry to develop capabilities for formulating investment projects. The goal is to guide subnational governments to execute investment efficiently. I would like to mention that this project does not finance project execution. It finances project elaboration, and then we provide them with information about available funding sources. The idea is to discourage municipalities to behave in an opportunistic way by always asking the extractive industry enterprise to finance infrastructure. We are aiming to potentiate their resources. If they are able to formulate a good quality project, they may get additional financing to Canon or whatever they have to execute more infrastructure projects. In this way, we aim to develop capabilities with public servants in charge of infrastructure projects in municipality, so our intervention has a sustainable impact and actual problems are solved. The whole process takes 1 year and is based on a methodology developed by International Financial Corporation, which has been carried out in different areas of the North and Central Highlands of the country. In fact, a part of the university's team worked in this previous experience developing the methodology and testing it in provinces at the south of Peru. This kind of intervention has achieved good results, since various projects obtained financing for state funds and from international cooperation. The effectiveness shown by the methodology has led enterprises related to extractive industries to finance intervention like the ones I am in charge of. However, there are certain elements that put in jeopardy the results' sustainability, which are worth mentioning. First, public servants' high rotation. What we have is high workers' instability closely related to the political cycle. Each 4 years, we have regional and local elections where many mayors are not re-elected. When new authorities take administration, they usually change all public servants, and the process must start from zero all over again. In some cases, skilled servants go to work in other municipalities or become qualified consultants, which improve the local market, and there is no need for consultants coming from Lima. Second, these areas' incomes are highly dependent on those generated by extractive industries. In this zone, especially in the rural areas, nearly 90% of the municipality's budget comes from transfers related to extractive industries. This implies an excessive exposure to extractive industry resources and high volatility in the municipality's income. In fact, forecasts estimated by a team in my university show that there are fiscal income elasticities greater than 2 in municipalities in these areas. Third, lack of will of the government to take further steps in strengthening the decentralization process. This is important because it shows the national authorities' political commitment and their pledge to improving capabilities. And fourth, existing social conflicts. It is difficult to carry out these efforts in a conflicted environment. Nevertheless, experiences like the ones mentioned may help contribute to reduce conflict level, since the population can see for real the benefits of having so many resources. This is the experience we wanted to share with you. And from the results observed so far is having a positive effect. Communities see results. Public servants are more prepared, and enterprises are involved in the effort. There is still a lot to do, but we hope this methodology will be used by more enterprises and include more municipalities. Thank you very much.
So I was listening to Carlos talking about the spending on monuments which happened with the Canon money. I've been to a lot of mining conferences in the last 10 years, and I remember about 1% of the titles of papers, but one that always stuck in my mind, I went to an early meeting about the EITI in Melbourne in about 2005, and there was a presentation by someone from Peru which was called Swimming Pools at 10,000 feet. Which was exactly on that. That's what, even though it freezes every night in the Andes, that people build a swimming pool because that was a sign of development. So thank you for that very interesting presentation. We will have questions, but Carlos, I just wanted to ask, has any of what you're doing or has the model been written up in a way that people here could access?
Yes.
It has, okay. In English or just Spanish?
In Spanish, and we have one version in English.
Okay, so we'll certainly try and to share that with you. Okay. So our third presenter for the session is Javier Aguilar. Javier is a Bolivian national. He worked in the national government in Bolivia for a number of years. I understand for about 8 or 9 years ago, moved across to work for the IFC and more recently for the World Bank. He's the Deputy Program Manager for the EITI initiative at the World, MDTF initiative at the World Bank, has a lot of experience clearly in the extractives area. He was also the primary author of the 2011 World Bank publication on implementing EITI at the subnational level. So please welcome Javier.
Thanks, David, and thanks everybody for the invitation, for sharing some ideas here. I presented some of, or prepared some previous ideas more on subnational issues and governance, but I was also trying to reflect on some of the discussions we had yesterday and today, which I find quite interesting. I would talk basically about, in terms of local governance, when we talk about local governance and the challenge of maximizing benefits of the mining sector, how does this really applies to the local regions, to what I would call resource-rich regions within resource-rich countries? We have heard a lot of the work of different companies, development agencies on different countries, but why should we really care and why should we focus on resource-rich regions within countries? It's not enough to generate and maximize benefits for the nation, for all the country citizens and for the national government. Experience is showing that it's not enough. And this also comes very straightforward to the issue of governance, because we can think on what might be the legal governance and the real governance. When we talk about legal governance, we might think that to have strong regulations, a signed contract with the country and all the legal permits, this is enough to develop a resource, and this is enough to guarantee access to the resources for companies to invest and to develop the mining activity. But at least what we are seeing more and more in Latin America, which is a highly decentralized region, this is not enough, because communities can take action, can get organized, and can even against all the legal framework and the legal governance agreed with investors just to decide that they're not going to get access to these resources due to several reasons. And I think some of the reasons should be can be discussed here, and also both Carlos have elaborated on that. So if we talk about regions and maximizing benefits, I think there is a lot that is already happening, but as somebody said yesterday, we should be a little bit more ambitious in terms of what mining companies can contribute to these regions. And more than just maximizing benefits or generating opportunities, I would say the real challenge is how to leverage the presence of mining activity to generate what we call regional development, long-term regional development, really to gain and unlock the real potential, the transformative potential of these large investments, which at the end of the day, anyway, they are highly transformative because they really transform these regions. These regions, after these projects or while these projects are operating, won't be the same thing anymore. But the thing is that the transformative effect or impact that we are looking at is a positive one, the one that really can help these regions in getting more economic activity, in linking to the markets, in accessing to the other opportunities, and at the end of the day, generating a better well-being for their local citizens. But what is sound local governance? And I think in terms of what we understand the local governance, it really goes beyond what government regulations or in terms of subnational government functioning is. There is a need for broader governance in terms of really the set of institutions, mechanisms, and processes that help to process key decisions for developing the industry in the region and the way that this industry might impact the citizens. And in this case, of course, location is key. And that's what really mining is about. Resources are in a particular place. You cannot move further and find different conditions. Companies develop a site or some reserves, and there is a need to access to these resources. But when companies and when industry think about what is the location and what is the impact of the project, I think there is an important issue also in terms of the geographic scope for benefit sharing. There's a possibility of deciding just to have an impact and to work with communities surrounding the site, the mining site, and try to really demonstrate a very clear effect on that, which I have seen in many, many, many different places in different regions in the world, that this is something that it's very easy to see, that there are communities really doing much better during or after the company was there than before. But this is sometimes for a very restricted number of communities. It's not the region as a whole. And this also can create problems in terms of deepening inequality. Having some processes of improvements, economic improvements for a few, but really not generating a more inclusive dynamic of regional or local economic development. I can think in different regions in the world that we very frequently name or mention, which are Bayelsa, it's an oil region in Nigeria, South Gobi in Mongolia, Cajamarca in Peru, Ahafo, Ashanti region in Ghana, Katanga in DRC, Sumatra in Indonesia, Tete province in Mozambique. So these are really places where you can see strong presence of mining activity. And this is not just about one mine doing good things. It's really, the challenge is how to come with a more integrated approach and a more integrated action. So local governments might mean different things for depending on the stakeholders. For the company, basically it would mean continued and uninterrupted access to the resources, but also means as a condition that social and environmental impacts are well managed as a condition for the issue that we are dealing with here, which is the shared prosperity for transforming these regions in terms of economic development. But how can this be done? We have discussed here one aspect of this benefit sharing, which is, I would say, which are the fiscal benefits. Taxes, royalties, that it's basically cash paid by companies that needs to be used or should be used, well used by the government, either national government or subnational governments. But there are also, there is an important aspect for regional development that can be really leveraged, not just on the fiscal benefits, but the non-fiscal benefits of the mining activity, which has been mentioned here. But I would say really where the potential for these non-fiscal benefits is mainly on infrastructure that can be used by multiple users, not just the mining companies. I'm talking basically about large regional or interregional infrastructure. What we call local content, which is basically employment generation, direct and indirect employment generation, supplier development or local enterprise formation, and of course vocational training, which is really a key thing for tackling the challenge of that, because you might have seen or heard from many companies saying, no, there's not enough workforce educated for this kind of jobs. But sometimes you go there 5 years after or 8 years later, and they're saying exactly the same thing. So there is, if this, of course, education is a matter of time, but if these things start now, in 5 years, in 8 years, it will be different. It's as the same thing as Carlos was saying in terms of municipal capacities for doing all this investment. There is a need for a sustained investment on that. And finally, what we can call corporate social investment. All this CSR, all the foundations, all these social trust funds that needs to be also integrated to what the other areas in terms of fiscal and non-fiscal benefits are doing. So I see that the real challenge is how to integrate all these possible channels of benefits sharing, transmission mechanisms for local economies, and really how to help local stakeholders to take advantage of this. I don't see that the challenge of local governance is just a challenge for local authorities. I see that perhaps mainly the challenge for local governance is for national governance, because most of the times what happens in terms of local governance depends on national regulations. Sometimes it is the environmental impact assessment, sometimes it's the water permit, and the way in which all these things are handled by the national government. That's what sometimes creates problems of local governance, not because of local authorities. Of course, there's a lot of local politicians trying to take advantage of whenever a large investment is taking place in their area. But I see that really national governments should come with a more proactive approach, really to set conditions to enable environment, to incentivize, to define certain conditions for the industry to operate in this way, and also for local authorities to try to drive all the efforts towards a more regional development program or integrated approach. Of course, subnational governments had a lot to do, and more in the cases like in Peru, they have a lot of resources, how to really invest these resources, but also addressing all the different aspects or sectors, considering what other also areas can do in terms of providing and leveraging benefits from the sector. Companies, I think for companies, the challenge is really to try to integrate these different interventions. Because you can see a lot of activism. There is a lot of good initiatives also, good examples, but not necessarily articulated in a way that this can be seen as a long-term effort for developing a region. And of course, collaboration between mining companies. This is much harder to achieve. If you talk about shared infrastructure, or if you talk about a shared small-scale enterprise program. So this is the kind of things that also national government can help in creating the conditions for this to happen. And in terms of development agencies, I think it's important that a lot of, and several, lot of support is needed for that. But I would say the very simple thing that maybe would help in creating some specific cases and demonstrated effect for this would be to adopt a region. Adopt a resource-rich region within a resource-rich country and work there in a sustained way so that leadership and a regional project can be supported and sustained for some time. And there will be, of course, a lot of different capacity demands for supporting. Let me finish with the final thought, maybe, in terms of a suggestion, a concrete suggestion for the Mining for Development initiative, and thinking more in this idea of adopting a region where there's a lot of potential for mining companies to operate, or where they are already operating. And in the same way as the ICMM, the International Council for Mining and Metals, did some time ago, developing this initiative, the Resource Endowment Initiative, they studied 4 countries, and they were trying to understand what are the main drivers for countries to overcome the resource curse for mining countries in doing that. I would suggest that maybe could be considered for the Mining for Development to develop a pilot program selecting 4 or 5 resource-rich regions globally in different regions within resource-rich countries. Establish a common approach in partnership with, of course, in consultation and partnership with countries, with companies, and also with development agencies. I think the World Bank will be really willing to partner in such a kind of approach, and aim it at creating a demonstrative effect. Thank you.
Please, and yes, just introduce yourself. Thank you.
My name is Henry Odwa from South Sudan. In our petroleum and mining laws, we have put there that any 3% from government take goes to the communities. But now the problem is how to define community. We have levels of government, the national government, the state government, and the local government at the county level. So the problem has been at the county level, we also have subunits called PIAMs. If, for example, the wells are concentrated in that little sub-PIAM, will the 3% go to this small area, or should it go to the county, or all the counties in the state share this well? And you find that one county, for example, would amass about $150 million a year, and there is totally no capacity to use that money. And worse still is that the local government officials are not elected. They are appointed by the governor. And as such, most of the money gets lost. So we are in a dilemma of how to address this. And some legislators are already saying that maybe we should take all that money back to the central government and use it in one way or another. So
Okay.
that's the kind of experience I thought we should share.
Thank you. That's very good. So we'll hold that one, and a couple of more contributions. Please, down the front. Yes, please. and then the two people behind.
Thank you. My name is Ali Munawar from Indonesia. I'm teaching at the University of Bengkulu in Sumatra. My question is to Professor Carls. You told us that how the involvement of the university people in these local extractive industries. How do you people in the university involve? Do you involve from the beginning while the company start working, or you just invited by the government or to solve some certain affairs?
Okay.
Me, I've been several years working in land rehabilitations, but it's based on my my research. I've been doing research funded by by government, and I go to the company. It's only because of me. I like to do it with the government, but I'm not involved with the government and industry altogether.
Okay. So I guess we'll hold that as well, but it's a framing question about how you, the practicalities of how you get involved in these capacity building activities. So a couple of other behind you. Thank you.
I'm Boy Umali of EITI Philippines. I'd just like to ask Professor Carlos also. Is it possible for the for the tax revenue from mining to be put to basic necessities while waiting for the community and the government to be capacitated, like water, health, sanitation, education, housing? Why the need to wait for the people to be capacitated for the government? Can you not do it now? Give it to basic services.
Right,
The money that you're.
Thank you. We'll capture, and I guess it also raises, which is part of your question, is the decision of, the requirement in Peru that the expenditure be restricted to capital expenditure and not to personnel, which is worth exploring. So there's a broader question there around if you do have this devolution of income, what conditions you put on its use. So I'll just take one more comment. I would encourage you just to, plenty of time for specific questions. We're very interested in drawing out some broader comments and observations around the challenges in your countries.
Yeah, anyone can answer this. I'm just curious. I'm Nelly Halcon from the Philippine Chamber of Mines.
Also from Philippines, yes, thank you.
I'm just curious why the EIA system that has long been utilized in almost all countries is now being a national debate. It's now in the national debate, and why local governance is also being debated nationally in Peru. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll just take one more comment, and then we have a few questions. We are still asking questions, so we'll have a few to work through. Please, just up. I think that, unless there's someone here, yeah, over there, gentlemen.
Mine was a question, actually. So I don't know. I just want. I guess it's a question about the South Central American experience, but in other parts of the world, in my experience, when you start talking about empowering subnational governments, there are political economy issues that come to the fore. So in other words, to the extent that you empower the subnational level is the extent to which you're actually risking the fragmentation of the nation state. Perhaps most dramatically, this is happening right now in Iraq, with the Kurdistan region, and then other governorates that now want to separate off from the Baghdad government. And maybe this is a feature of oil economies rather than mining economies. But I suppose the question is, is there evidence of that in the South American experience, that to the extent that you're empowering subnational entities, this is the extent to which the center starts to not be able to hold, and this is a feature of, I think, petrostates, that the subnational units are deliberately kept weaker for these very reasons.
And we'll open that to the panel, but one response on that is it's quite difficult, because if you take a case, for example, of Bougainville, where you had a very centralised approach by government, that had the exact opposite effect. So sometimes you decentralise to hold the centre together rather than the other way around. So it's very difficult. So we had several observations and comments there. I'll start with the very specific one from the gentleman from South Sudan, and just ask anyone on the panel to comment. This is kind of quite vexed question when you have a devolution of income flows, and it can be, as you say, 3% to the community and so on. What's the process whereby you actually, what's your unit that you should, how do you go about that process of determining who the recipient community is? Javier, you going to comment? Or, yeah.
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes, that's good.
I think that in general, this is not just a problem for natural resources. It's a fiscal decentralization problem, or a question: what is the assignment problem? What level should really what level can provide or deliver certain functions or services, and how much money they should get for this to happen? But when you add to this picture natural resources, there are certain political aspects that also as a kind of a sense of entitlement by certain regions, and pressure, political pressure to get some access to these resources. What I can say from experience in different countries is that, of course, a very careful analysis should be undertaken, which would be the level that can really provide these services, where the capacity will be before assigning or allocating these funds. Because once you do that, then there's no way back. Or it's very difficult. You have really to have strong political power and consensus nationally to go back and say, okay, now we will redistribute these funds. Also, I think in many cases, this idea of benefits sharing, or fiscal benefit sharing, initially it was a good one, saying it's a way of transferring some funds to these very poor regions and remote areas. But once the oil companies or mining companies start operating and paying such amount of taxes that are due to the distribution, they are getting so much money. So it's really quite inefficient. And it can be also very inequitable in terms of the differences with other districts which are not getting these funds. So I would say basically they try to think on where the capacity is, and really try to avoid concentration. I would say sometimes companies tend to try to push or lobby national governments to get these concentrations and to get as much resources as possible to this specific area. But I think there is a need to think broadly in terms of what is really the regional area, and where the capacity can be also, if it's not there, but built, but very realistic, in very realistic terms.
So I guess 2 points there is obviously the timing factor, because once you start down that path, you can't really come back, and probably to think in terms of larger aggregates rather than smaller as the administering entity. Yeah.
I should say that economic theory says that the more efficient level would be the national level.
Yes.
When it comes to natural resources and to share the rents of that. But of course, theory is not reality.
And your point about not turning back, it's very difficult now for Peru to turn back from the Canon Minera, despite the the challenges that it's presenting. I'm not going to pick up on each of those questions in exact order, but I wanted to ask, which was actually our third question asked, because I think it follows on from this around it's around the use of funds, and it's a question I guess either Carlos can answer, which is you're saying in the Peruvian case, why do you have to wait to build capacity in order to spend the money? And as part of that, why is it that the Canon Minera restricts the expenditure to capital expenditure as opposed, for example, to actually pay the people to come in and provide the resources you don't have? So.
Well, in the Peruvian case, we have the use of the funds will go to capital expenditure. The idea is that we have temporary high incomes or revenues during the period of life of the project. So the basic idea is to transform these temporary resources in permanent resources through the development of infrastructure projects in health, education, productive projects, and water and sanitation. No? So the expectation is that the temporary revenues may become in improve of the standard of quality of life in these areas. And why we need, or why we talk about the lack of capacity? Because in Peru we have a transparency portal in the web from the Ministry of Finance where you can see how the subnational governments and the national government are spent. So you can see the execution ratios. You can see that the national government is now executing 60% of their budget, or the subnational government 50%. So the media is always see these figures to inform to the people. So, but we have a problem because as mayors and ministries or governors see these figures, they want to spend more quickly. But they don't take in account the quality of the expenditure. So we have in Peru a results-based budgeting process. So we are engaging subnational governments and national governments in a territory. So we want to increase the quality of the fiscal expenditure. So we are in the initial steps. So we want to have a good impact evaluation of investment with resources from extractive industries in order to see how it will benefit the population. No? This is the main system that works in Peru.
Okay, Carlos.
I wanted to build on that and then jump into some of the more general issues. I think that what we have been learning collectively in Peru is that you don't solve problems of capacity by going and running a 2-day workshop and then going back home and saying, okay, that should have an impact.
That's a terrible thing for a university to hear, but it's
true. No, but so I think the collective learning is you have to find ways, and what Carlos and the Universidad del Pacifico are doing is finding ways to work on a more permanent basis, to be there, no? To provide permanent company and technical assistance in doing things hands-on with the local officials in charge. And of course we face challenges. I mean, every 4 years, most of these personnel will go and you have a new mayor and then you have to start again, and that's the way it goes. Now, going back to some of the more general questions, in Peru, the way this happened is that we had an authoritarian regime, and there was a broad coalition of social citizens forces that brought him down. And one of the demands of this broad coalition, because this authoritarian regime was also extremely centralist, was to push for decentralization. And at the same time, the mining boom started. So it was impossible, politically speaking, to do something like saying, okay, we want to decentralize, but first we're going to send all public officials to the Universidad del Pacífico to get trained, and then 7 years from now we will start decentralization. That sounds like logical, but politically that was impossible. So we had to launch decentralization. So we have faced the challenge of building capacities at the same time that these local officials were receiving these huge amounts of money. But that was the political process. And why now we are discussing about subnational governance, no? And this kind of issue? It's because of social conflict. We have a strong social resistance, not in the old mining areas, but especially in the new mining areas where people do not have a mining culture and are busy doing other things, no? There's a strong social resistance that has brought down 2 cabinets with 2 prime ministers, no? So there's a whole debate of what is not working, what's wrong with the arrangements, with the decision-making processes, what are the problems of governance that are generating this political crisis. And finally, I wanted to say that I think it's a universal discussion, not only in Peru, not only Latin America, but elsewhere, how to define local, no? When the canon law in Peru was discussed initially, the idea was, well, money should go to the impacted populations. But which are the impacted populations, no? Is it just that the local community where the mining site is? Is it the broader thing? Are the communities where the road, no, and the whole transport system has an impact? How do you define that? And by the way, the same is happening now when we are, in many countries in Latin America, now trying to implement the ILO 169, the consultation laws. Who is to be consulted? I mean, who is to be compensated? Well, who is to be consulted? So how do you define local? In the case of Peru, after many discussions, the decision was a pragmatic one. Let's go to the districts. That's the lower existing administrative units. They have an elected government. They have management, budget management capacity. So we'll give the money to them, and we hope that, through participatory mechanisms, most or some of the money would go to the actually impacted populations within that district. But we couldn't find a solution, to the question of local other than the pre-existing small-scale administrative unit.
And maybe to complement, yes. In Peru we have 24 departments. In each department we have a governor, a regional government in a department. So under this level we have the provincial municipalities. We have 94 provinces. And under we have 1,900 almost districts. So you have to distribute all the resources between regional governments, districts, and provinces. So in Peru, you can see all the production in 1 year, and you assign the total amount of one department in function of the production. So then you distribute all the resources. To the regional government of the department goes 20%. And to all the districts in that department goes 75% of the resources. And for public universities located in this department goes 5% of the total resources. So we have now that, for example, between municipalities and regional governments, we have $3 billion in the bank accounts that they cannot spend. It is a huge amount of money in Peru. And public universities has about 300 millions of dollars that they can spend. Because in the public sector or in the public universities, they don't have researchers. Because the use of these funds to the university goes to research. But and they can make research because they don't have researchers. This is the main problem now in Peru. So we, like Universidad del Pacífico, for example, we are looking for an association with that university so they can pay us. The private universities, they don't can spend this money in their professors or in their researchers.
Thanks, Carlos. It's almost, not spending it's almost like an informal sovereign wealth fund, isn't it? It just builds up because you can't spend
like
it.
a stabilization fund.
Yes. Carlos, a quick comment, and then we'll have some more questions from the floor.
Yes, two things. The first, that in Latin America, the question of extractive rent distribution and use is very heterogeneous. You have on one extreme Mexico, in which most, or if not all, of the oil money goes into the national budget. And the producing regions, Tabasco, no, and others, do not get any particular benefit from that. No? It's a very entrenched idea that oil is of Mexicans, so all the oil rent goes to the national budget, and the Congress and the executive negotiate on the national budget, and everybody benefits.
At the other extreme, sorry, you will have the South Chile, which mining also does basically things the same. This is basically national resources, and there's no transfer, no distribution to regions.
And Ecuador is going down that line, no? Recentralizing the national budget. In Colombia and Peru, we had very strong fiscal decentralization schemes. In Colombia now they have been recentralizing, no, royalties in the hand of the central government. In Bolivia, you have a scheme in which an important part of the money now goes through cash transfer programs, not to the territories, but to vulnerable sectors of society, the elderly, no, families with young children, women who are pregnant or have children under 2. No? So we have, there's no one Latin American way of doing things. No? Yeah. There's a strong variety. It has to do with local history, local political arrangements that you have to understand in order to understand why rent is being distributed and used in that manner.
Thank you, Carlos.
If I may add, David, to this, just saying that even some countries thinking in re-centralization or redistribution due to the high concentration. This is Colombia, just last year approved a new law for redistribution of the mining and the oil royalties, looking at more equitable distribution. Brazil is struggling with passing a new law for distributing oil royalties in a more equitable manner also. That's other part of the...
Yeah, a very active space. We have a question here, or comment?
Thank you. Two questions, actually.
Yep.
Edward Bickham from the ICMM. First question is, a coalition of civil society and companies working together have sponsored a change in the EITI rules. So the new rules will be focusing much more on subnational transfers. And that will be obligatory for companies to declare the direct payments they make to subnational, but also, whereas in Peru there is the canon minera, a requirement that those transfers be tracked so that people can see where the money's going as it goes around. So I'd be interested as to what the panelists think about how that subnational transparency can be used most effectively to inform local debate and discussion and to ensure that resources are used better. Secondly, a key challenge for any mining company is that it's very difficult to have a good impact on the development of a region around a big mine if there isn't effective presence of the state. And you've talked a bit about capacity building, and that's clearly a big challenge in many countries. Be interested to know from the Peruvians, and I suspect Javier knows quite a lot about this too, about what your views are about the voluntary contributions regime which applied in Peru for a period. As I understand it, the Garcia government didn't tear up the fiscal stabilization agreements. They twisted the arms of the companies to say, you can pay more, but of course it's voluntary. And that then generated a separate channel of funding that effectively meant that companies and the provinces were having, and other local government units, effectively having to work together in designing and implementing projects. Did that help at all in overcoming some of these capacity constraints?
Is anyone particular? Carlos? Yeah.
regarding the second question, the story is that under the previous government, there was an arrangement for the companies to provide additional payments because of extraordinary incomes, because of the prices, no? And the deal was that that money was to be spent directly by the companies in the producing areas. And I think it was a very interesting experience because indeed, as you have said, it forced companies to reach agreements with the regional governments, and it also generated a very important transparency mechanism. We could all track, soul by soul, how much money was being provided by companies through these special funds, and how that money was spent. So I think it was, it forced this kind of agreements with the regional governments, but it also opened the door for civil society and citizens at large to monitor. Now, that scheme has been now ended, no? And it has been replaced by a new negotiation between government and mining companies, because during the election everybody spoke about a windfall profit tax, and no, profits are too much, they should pay more. And the new deal means more money for the government, that is true, lesser than what it has been said, because payments are going to be for $3 billion, but all these payments are going to be discounted from income tax. So when you add and subtract, I think it's going to be half of what was actually announced. But the thing that I don't like about the new arrangement is that all money goes to the central government, and there's no transparency mechanism associated to that. So it's part of the trend, the Latin American trend, I would say, to re-centralize the funds. That what has happened in Peru. So it's more money, but it's more centralized and it's less transparent than the previous mechanism.
Okay. Javier?
In terms of EITI and how EITI can contribute at the subnational level, it is for a long time now, there is a question that it's very clear that it's coming from different sectors, of course, provinces, local stakeholders, media. How local authorities are investing the resources they are getting. This is the real thing that people want to know. And up to now, EITI was basically more focused on payments and transfers, how much money is coming to the region. But I think if properly implemented in many of the places where there is a strong decentralization and transfers are coming to the subnational governments, EITI really can be a key instrument in addressing and making it more public and known, widely known, that there is not just the question of whether the region is getting or not the resources, which is good. I have seen many times that majors saying companies are not paying, but they are getting the funds. And the thing is that they were not using it properly. So, but the key challenge to me is how to engage local authorities in more decentralized context, where you have autonomous governments that not necessarily are going to sign immediately to EITI. There's a need for some consensus, some engagement with local authorities that really want to be transparent and do this as part of perhaps differentiating themselves from other local governments that are not doing that, and in this way creating some pressure. In terms of this voluntary agreement, which was a very particular experience in Peru, I think the main thing has come up to the capacity issue, because when the government was trying to raise more taxes, companies immediately said, but we are paying that much money and all this money is in your bank accounts. And so what are all these majors and regional governments, what are going to do with more savings? So then immediately they defined an institutional arrangement to use private sector capacity to implement infrastructure and different services, basically
paid through this new payment agreed with the government. And following that, I don't know if this is common in other countries also, other regions, I think the government in Peru came up with a new law that they call it works for taxes, where it's not just for mining or it's not just for extractive industries, it's for any company that would like to advance public infrastructure and that later on they can basically reduce their tax payments. Of course, this really entails a lot of challenge in monitoring properly the way that all this infrastructure has been built.
Thank you. And
David?
Perhaps for people who are not familiar with the Peruvian situation, sorry?
You have there somebody who was trying to make a question
Someone
a long
down here.
time ago. Sorry.
I've been asking for a long time, David, sorry.
Sorry, it's very hard to see up there. So. And then we have someone down here. Okay.
Okay, a couple of... David Allen from
Okay, David.
Spectrum in Myanmar. I'm particularly interesting presentations, thanks, particularly given that I've just been in Peru looking at some of these sorts of things. So a couple of comments and a couple of questions. On the questions of investment, I wonder if there's potential for framing some of the regional reinvestment things more in terms of outcomes. And your comments on that would be very welcome. So for me, there were various cases quoted where there were significant programs for purchase of computers, for example, but there was no energy to run the computers, and so it was considered just to be an entirely wasteful spending regime. Another question relates to the political economy questions. So in some of the regions, Cajamarca in particular instance, where it receives the highest rents from the canon, go back to sub-regional level, and effectively some are of the view that these funds are being used specifically to raise and to sponsor the anti-mining lobby to, in fact, then cause a reduction in the economic development potential of the region. And so that's a very controversial question, but I'd be interested in your comments on that. And then the third one, so Peru's doing very well from EITI perspective. In terms of budget transparency, they're also doing very well. They rate as 56 out of 100 on the International Budget Project Open Budget Survey, which is an excellent result. What sort of looking has there been done on how satisfactory regional budget transparency measures might have in terms of improving the situation of constituency improvement and accountability through something like a sub-regional budget transparency monitoring mechanism? So some comments on those three things. So one in terms of accountability of investment and whether actually looking for outcomes might be a better thing. The second one is on whether how sub-regional groups may use funds that are in fact not in the national interest and how the national government feels about that. And then the third one is on sub-regional budget transparency mechanisms.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. And I just asked the panel to just respond quickly because there's one more question I'd like to get to before we finish. Yes.
Okay. We at Revenue Watch have been helping out local NGOs. Propuesta Ciudadana is a network of NGOs that have been doing monitoring of budget expenditures at the subnational level, particularly in those areas in which budgets are composed heavily of extractive rent. I think that the balance is that active monitoring has forced regional governments to be more transparent and more accountable regarding how much money they are receiving and where is it being spent, how is it being spent. Now, to say that that has also improved the quality of spending, I think that's that there's a long distance between the first and the second, because the quality of spending has to do not only with transparency mechanisms, but also with strong participatory budgeting and with the capacity development of the same local government. We have been working on both also, developing capacities for budgeting and planning and expenditures, and we have been working on the question of transparency, but it's difficult to say in such a short term that already the quality of investment has improved. But the work has been done on the transparency matter, and I think it's very important to carry on doing so, because regional governments need to feel that they have an eye on them, and there are active institutions. No? And the second, the question of Cajamarca, I would say that yes, probably the regional government has used some money to sponsor some of the protests and maybe to fund whatever activity has been done, but I think that the opposition to the Conga mining project is not explained in any way because the regional government is using some of the money, maybe even illegally, to sponsor some kind of anti-mining activity. The opposition to this mining project has to do with a 20-year presence of a company in Yanacocha that has alienated everybody because of its abusive and non-democratic and practices in the region, and now they're just harvesting what they have planted during 20 years. Now, by the side, you have other mining companies that are doing okay in the same Cajamarca. They are not subject to this kind of social conflict. So I think there are deeper and historical problems with the way Yanacocha has performed in that region that explain the kind of opposition that they are facing now.
Thank you, Carlos. Now, the third question I'll ask perhaps either Javier or Carlos to comment on briefly. Please.
If I may just comment quickly on the idea of setting targets for expenditures and which areas should be, in which areas these resources should be used. There is an experience that is the Colombian experience, where they have decided minimal coverage for education, for health, for water, potable water, as criteria for allocating the funds and as a criteria to track local government expenditures. It is also, I think the experience is mixed, because it's not clear that by doing this, governments have spent necessarily on, local governments have spent on this. In general, I would say for budget transparency and more for the kind of arrangements that can be done in terms of improving this allocating and expenditure capacities. To me, there is quite important to recognize that there is a limit for all these provincial, regional, municipal, district, local governments to where they can reach with their existing capacity and for what they have been designed. I think there's a problem that by design, these institutions have not been set to manage such amounts of investments. And this is important to recognize. So I'm coming from a long experience of working with municipal governments, fiscal issues, and trying to strengthen those. And at some point, in my personal experience was that there is no way of fixing these municipal governments or these provincial governments broadly in terms of budgeting, in terms of accountability, transparency. There is no way for that. Okay. And I think it's better to go for specific arrangements where, for example, a kind of this kind of social funds, social investment funds, or some of the matching program for matching grants, where capacities can be pooled and serve a large number of districts, municipalities for working on that.
Thank you. Someone else has also been waiting very patiently for a question. So last question and then last comment, please.
Thank you. Interesting one.
Just say where you're
I'm Mariati from Publish What You Pay Indonesia.
Yes.
If we're talking about in the context of subnational, because of the community and local government affected by the externality from the mining operation, even they get income from the revenue. But yes, I agree. In the one side, there are a lack of capacity from local government to use the revenue for welfare and others. But in the other side, we know that there are asymmetric information between company and the community and the central government as well. I just thinking about how using the EITI as a window or starting point to open and to addressing the asymmetric. For example, when they look at the EITI report, subnational government, they can find they just find the payment, something like the tax and other, but some local government want to know how the production, and also some specific issue like a grade of concentrate, something like that, how they shipment to export another place. So this is a problem of asymmetric informations in the payment and in revenue. And the other side, there are also the problem of information asymmetric authority between local government and central government, because the company have a contract, making contract with central government, so that the contract cannot be accessed by the central government and by the local government and community. So that's how the challenges is how we can use this EITI initiative to addressing this asymmetric information and asymmetric authority.
And I'll just ask for one comment, maybe Carlos Casas, please, or Javier.
I think that what EITI is trying to address is precisely this asymmetric information problem. And in terms of subnational transfers, there are two things that I think EITI can address or should address at the subnational level. One is to make transparent the distribution criteria and how the government has defined the amount of resources available, what the criteria are, and how much funds have been not just allocated but disbursed. Because sometimes there are many different ways in which central government can just take more time for transferring these funds along the fiscal year. So one thing is to make very clear by which reasons local governments are getting what they are getting. And the other thing is, I would say specifically on expenditure, in which way local governments have made use and allocated the resources they have gotten, and also in terms of not just the budget, because sometimes you can see a very nice budget. I mean basically execution. And this is where EITI methodology with the reconciliation and the auditors that check this can really provide more reliable information.
Okay, thank you. I'm very conscious we're now running into lunchtime, so we will need to stop. It's obviously a very stimulating session. There are a number of people still keen to ask questions. I'm sure our panel members will be happy to meet with you over the break. So just what's happening now, we have lunch. We reconvene at 2 o'clock. Again, there are two concurrent sessions, one on preventing conflicts through positive stakeholder relationships, which I assume is in here, and the second on building sustainable local enterprise and employment. So as we close out, please join me in thanking our panel for a very stimulating discussion.